Hello everyone. In this video I wanted to talk about what awakening is and about my own journey towards it. It all probably started when I was about 17 or maybe even earlier, around 14. At 14 somehow I had a realization and I understood that I could change my life, but I didn't really like it. So basically I didn't really like what was happening, but at the same time it seemed like I could choose something, do something. Of course, at 14, a person still can't make fully independent decisions. Not everything depends on them. And then, closer to 18, around 17, when I could already make decisions, I found myself in a kind of depressive state. At that time, depression was just my normal way of life. I remember just sitting there, kind of blankly, and typing into the computer something like, "Who am I, and why am I alive?" That's when I stumbled upon some forum, and there I met some guys who were into spiritual development, or more accurately, esotericism. And that's basically how my journey started. I began getting into esotericism, reading different books. I came across Osho. There was this thin little book called Meditations. I read it, but nothing. I didn't understand it, didn't get what exactly I was supposed to do or how. There were all these abstractions in there, like perceive everything as a game, but it wasn't really clear what that meant, or how to treat things as a game, or what to do with that. So I tried meditating, spending the whole day at it until I got a headache, trying to stop my thoughts. At 17, that's really hard to do because life inside is just boiling over and it's very difficult to quiet the mind. But I didn't give up, I kept going, and it seemed to me that I was already meditating. Then a couple of months would go by, and I'd realize that this wasn't meditation, that Osho was still writing about something else. Then a year would pass, and again I'd realize that it wasn't about that. It wasn't meditation, it wasn't working, that there were still thoughts. And so it went. My state was still rather depressive. Yes, I didn't like my life. I didn't like the world around me. I couldn't understand why people deceive each other, kill each other, and so on. It felt strange to live in this world. I would wake up and not understand at all why I was waking up, what the point of it was. So every day you wake up, stare at the ceiling, and it's all over again. What's next? What's the point of all this? Well, building a career or a family seemed like utter nonsense. I mean, how can you build something if your foundation is rotten? That is, if the whole world around you isn't set up for it. It's like a feast during the plague, really. I mean, maybe my empathy played a role at that point. That is, my empathy was already developed. I somehow took other people's suffering very much to heart. And basically there is always a pervasive sense of negativity that surrounds people, and you constantly and acutely feel its presence, and again you inevitably get this feeling, a sense of dissonance, like you watch how some people go about things without a second thought. They have kids, live their lives, build and build and build, then at some point everything starts to fall apart for them. They can't manage to create some kind of ideal. It's like they say, ant happiness, right? On the elephant's paw. The elephant shifted and everything came crashing down. The ants ended up trampled. It's the same here. A person lives without really thinking much about how they live, or why, or for what purpose. As a result, most often they fail to build the kind of life they want because they always have some expectations. And all of this turns into fuss, into arguments with relatives. Children grow up and start ignoring you. They start treating you negatively, let's put it that way. Well, there's no understanding, right? Usually between parents and children, adolescents, all that. In general, if you look at it this way, life consists of nothing but problems. That's how I started to perceive life at 14. I suffered and suffered. By 17, I was already questioning why I was even alive, because I was just fed up with all of it. Then I got really interested in esotericism, and there were some distinct stages along the way. different kinds of life stages like that. Well, in terms of esotericism, I did something, sometimes things worked out for me, then I realized that I was going in circles and always coming back to where I started. No matter what I did there was never any real meaning in it. When it came to meditation, I came across different teachers on the internet. I was interested, watched various courses. Then the course would end and I'd go back to where I started again. So basically I was always just going in circles. My life experience changed a little, my thoughts changed a bit, but more or less everything stayed the same. And then at some point I was just walking down the street. At that time I was also practicing meditation. That period was really a time of active practice for me. You just sit down, close your eyes and sit there. You don't do anything. That's the kind of meditation it was, the simplest kind. So I was walking and I felt this pressure in my head. I was coming home from work, tired, the job was physical. And the pressure was really strong. I think I was 23 at the time. I tried to relax the crown of my head somehow because that's where the pressure was. My body relaxed. At some point I felt this sense of fullness. I'd never felt that kind of fullness before. It felt like my whole previous life was the life of, I don't know, some kind of useless, squeezed out lemon that had never really lived before. At that moment it felt like real life had finally begun. I felt really good. I mean, regardless of anything, I didn't do anything special. I was just walking down the street and it just hit me. Honestly, it's just impossible to put into words. Your whole body fills with bliss and you feel, I guess, even bigger than your own body. It felt amazing. In short, I remained in that particular state until the late evening. In the evening, I believe I experienced some kind of disagreement with a young girl. And my everyday, ordinary life, so to speak, inexorably pulled me back into my usual familiar state of being. And that new fleeting state just gradually faded away, disappearing completely. The only thing that remained in my mind was the question, who am I? If before it was kind of an abstract question, now I really wanted to find out who I am. But I didn't understand what that question even meant. To me it was obvious that I'm Dima, that this is my body, this is me. But the question, it didn't just stick with me. It wasn't even on the level of thought, but more like a feeling, a need to understand who I am, to figure out who I really am. I thought, well, I'll probably figure this out quickly. I'll just sit down and meditate for a bit. After all, it was through meditation that I came to this, and indeed some of those states did repeat, but very, very distantly. So I would walk around, and it seemed magical to me. I could just lie somewhere for an hour or two, sunbathing, looking at the grass, watching ants crawling around, and ladybugs too. I felt good, but honestly I still didn't understand why all of this. I started having thoughts again. I didn't know what was next, whether I was supposed to just stay there on the grass or on that beach, or where to go from there. I started searching for some kind of meaning in life, getting interested in different things from time to time, and some period of time passed again, a new stage in my life began, and I guess it lasted until a certain point. Once again, everything in life seems to go in bursts like that. You live, 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 then comes a realization and something changes, a turning point in life, and then you keep on living. Well, while all these... Alright, let me continue, I'll tell you more. While these cycles keep going, and one of those realizations was that I had been practicing for many years and had even started meditating with other people, helping them, dealing with some psychosomatic issues, working with the body. But I still have thoughts. No matter where I go, I'm always thinking about something. And I got angry at myself, just sat down on a chair and thought, I'll sit here until the thoughts go away. I'll just sit and wait because I'm tired of this. It seems like I've been meditating for a long time, but I'm constantly thinking about something. So meditation, it turns out, is just a period of time while I'm sitting, let's say. Then I get up, open my eyes, and the thoughts start up again. So I sat down there. Honestly, I only sat for a couple of days, but I managed to learn how to stop my thoughts. So I would just sit there with my eyes closed or open, then get up, walk around the room, and gradually the thoughts would stop coming. And that's how, in fact, I got rid of them. The chronology. I don't remember how old I was. Maybe 24, something like that, probably. Maybe, well, yeah, probably 24. That's how I learned to feel the present moment, at least as I understood it back then. Yeah, so here's the room, here's my body, here's the present moment, I'm in it, everything is fine. But not everything was actually fine. I learned to stop my thoughts, to be in the moment, but my body was lagging behind me. That is to say, absolutely everything I had personally experienced before in my life, all those numerous and challenging years of profound depression, of consistently being trapped in these deeply unpleasant, dark and clouded mental states, it all profoundly and persistently stayed within the very core of my being, deeply embedded in my physical body. And I couldn't do anything about it. So there are no thoughts, but the body, figuratively speaking, hurts and triggers certain thoughts. So you can try to run from them, but they're in your body. So there are these spots in the body that just, well, they're filled with pain and you can't do anything about them yourself. That's it. At this stage I came across another teacher. He gave me practices that were supposed to help me deal with my body. And it was here that the final stretch toward awakening probably began, because the only thing holding me back was my own body. That's it. Its contents. The contents, how can I explain it to you? Well, you could call it psychosomatics. You know, when you feel bad, when you have some anxieties, you feel them somewhere in your chest. Who's noticed that? And there can be a lot of such responses and imprints. If you constantly experience a certain sensation, it kind of accumulates and stays inside you. It just sits there and you can't get away from it. Gradually it becomes more defined, you become it, it becomes a part of you and your personality, and you need to somehow separate yourself from it, because it's not really you, it's just your experience. You need to find a way to get away from it. So I started working on dissolving all of this, dissolving it in my body, dissolving and dissolving up to a certain point, probably up to the point where it stopped bothering me, meaning I could be at peace in meditation. And in the background, something somewhere in my body was still living its own life, but I understood that it wouldn't last much longer. It's on its way to dissolution, meaning all of it is gradually dissolving. I don't even need to do anything, just be at peace. And at some point after a good meditation, I went to the kitchen to get some water. So I went to drink some water. There was a 5-liter water jug and there was little water left, less than half. I picked it up like this, started drinking, and I didn't understand what happened. I had the sensation that I was that water jug. I was probably about 25 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So I drank not a lot. I didn't understand anything, put it down and thought, well, maybe it's just some effect from meditation, didn't really pay much attention to it. Basically, it also seemed to me that there was something subtle and unclear about that moment. In general, I didn't pay attention to it until the experience repeated itself. I was standing on the platform, leaving, heading away from my relatives. I was waiting for the train and watching it as it started to approach. Yes, I saw it in the distance. I also couldn't understand whether I was the train, or I was here, or I was coming towards myself, or the train was moving inside me, I was standing there waiting for the train. In other words, it all seemed like nonsense at first glance. It was very unclear where I was, where the train was, where the platform was, and what actually connects us at all. But somehow I started to realize that maybe I am more than that. That which connects me as a body to the train, the platform, the people standing on it. Then in general, all of this is such a subtle, barely perceptible feeling. It's like a dream. At that moment, my attention simply had nothing left to cling to with thoughts. As I already said, once I figured them out, I just got tired of them. From depression, well, I got tired of life, I became disillusioned with it, you could say. More precisely, not life itself, but the approach to life, this kind of mental approach. Then when I started to feel it, I began to sort out my inner world. Then when I more or less calmed my body and mind, there was nothing left. That is, you could say that I expanded. I became, using the example with the train, yes, both the train and the platform, I'm everywhere because there's nothing for my attention to latch onto. I got so fed up with myself, with this personality, that I wasn't interested in clinging to it anymore. To this body, to this name, to all these conventions, I don't know, to a profession, to nationality, to whatever else you could latch onto. When you genuinely don't get involved in all of this, you truly expand and grow. You realize that you are everywhere. But it turned out that living in this experience wasn't so simple. That is, I started going back to the past. First to the positive, then to the negative. I was constantly remembering things, I felt nostalgic. I started clinging very strongly because here, it's like there's this total emptiness where everything happens, and you are this emptiness, and there's nothing to hold on to. And you start to remember things or bring up some old acquaintances, cling to them, get disappointed because it's not the same anymore, they no longer satisfy you. You're not really interested in discussing old topics, absolutely nothing truly interests you. You tend to cling to various things, and then everything just melts away in your hands, leaving you feeling deeply disappointed. There were times when I met up with friends, sat in McDonald's, drank coffee, looked out the window, and what you might call samadhi would arise, when you're sitting there, and again, you don't understand where you are, here or there. At the same time, there's complete clarity, but you feel kind of drunk. You're intoxicated by something you can't explain, and you have a cup of coffee in your hands. But you are intoxicated. Very much so. So I couldn't understand what was going on at all. I'm sitting there looking out the window, everything is as usual. My usual friend, there he is, sitting there. But something is off. I would zone out. I could just sit there zoning out for as long as I wanted. It's not a practice, you're not doing anything on purpose. You're just curious, you don't understand what's happening. It happens automatically, you're just drawn there, pulled in. You try to figure out what it is. Well, not to understand it with your mind, but just to feel it, to become aware of it. And then at some point I started to realize that it was all like in a movie. Everything seems normal, these cars are driving by, but they fascinate me so much I can't look away from them. Then I began to realize that these cars, as if, are driving inside me, that there is again something subtle within which everything is happening. If this is all a movie, then the movie is me. I am both the projector and the body, I am the car, I am everywhere. In other words, this movie is me. And there is no one watching it. It just happens. No, there is no center, no dima, there is nothing at all. There is simply this being before presence, you could call it an experience. Presence. There is just my presence, but not only my own me. There is presence, just something global. What you could call this movie that is happening, a living movie that arises spontaneously. It appears on the fly right now. At this very moment, this movie is playing and it doesn't stop. And it has never stopped. Not before I was born, and it won't stop after I die. And there is no one except for this movie. There is the movie and nothing else. There never was and never will be. Everything happens by itself. That is, the movie alive. Then I began to see everything as living consciousness. Over time, some more time passed. There were many different experiences, they were vivid, and I found them described in various Hindu books. I saw a kind of resonance there, that the same experiences I had were described there. There were so many of them, I won't even describe them. They were sometimes majestic, sometimes frightening, and all sorts of things. All of this went on for some time. I became interested in sharing this experience. I tried to share it with an acquaintance of mine, started to help her in some way. It took me about a year to help her reach the same state. It worked. A year later, the person saw the world the same way I did. It was very strange. Here's a person next to you and they're looking, well, they're experiencing the same thing as you, they're aware of it too. It's a very interesting experience. At least it was for me. But it ended very quickly indeed, because I was kind of forcefully and persistently dragging this unsuspecting acquaintance toward a profound awakening. She eventually awakened, though she didn't fully understand why or what had truly transpired, and then she simply went right back to her previous life as if nothing significant had ever happened. So her knowledge remained more as a mental memory. But that particular state, when you sort of truly wake up inside a vivid dream, it slowly faded away, completely disappearing. Well, it's not even really a state, it's more like the absence of all states. So no matter what happens to your body, you're always in neutrality. Even if it's filled with love or some pleasant sensations. By the way, I forgot to mention those. When the body is freed from negativity, it observes this movie, this dream in which you've awakened. You start to feel good, bliss spreads throughout your body, and love flows from your heart. And this love arises even when you're just sitting on a bench at a playground, looking off somewhere. Kids are running around, people are walking by. The wind blows, the leaves sway, and you just feel overwhelmed with love. Just because the leaves are swaying, or a car drives by, or there's a fountain. I really loved watching the fountain. And let's get back to my desire to awaken someone. When I awakened that girl and she went back to her normal life, I became disillusioned with that idea. I realized there was no point in sharing with people. Because as it seemed to me at the time, they would just go back to their own lives, to their, so to speak, karma, and it's pointless to try to pull them somewhere if they don't want it. Then I abandoned that idea for many years. I lost interest, I lived my own life, and life just digested me. The thing is, it's impossible to live while awakened. As long as there is still a personality, there are awakened ones. When there's almost no personality left at all, the awakened one disappears, and what remains is probably just presence or awakening itself, this very movie itself. And it's as if you don't exist, meaning there's this experience of I am not. You don't identify with anything, you just live. And just as this movie spontaneously creates reality, you also spontaneously take some actions, and you simply feel good. There is no search anymore. Well, it's not like you always feel good, there are still some experiences just like everyone else. You don't get carried away by them, they just happen to you, that's all. To you. At the same time, even your sleep gradually changes, meaning do you fall asleep? I remember being aware of myself in my dreams, and I was aware just as I am when I'm awake. And I was actually laughing in my sleep. It was funny to me that I used to take life so seriously and separated dreams from reality. After the awakening experience, those boundaries became blurred. So there is neither dream nor reality. Everything is the same. You sleep, you can be aware of yourself, you can do things in your dreams, but there is no longer any identification with some character as yourself. It doesn't matter, everything just happens. There were different experiences, also in dreams, but then gradually everything evened out, and I stopped seeing any difference. It's hard to remember how I used to sleep before awakening and how I sleep now. Somehow everything has leveled out. And there's one more thing I should probably mention. It's like life has almost digested you and everything has become a calm, settled inside. But there was still probably something left, not really a search, but a subtle kind of expectation, maybe of something, I don't know, some kind of fulfillment. And at one moment life somehow put an end to that. That is, circumstances arose in which it wasn't a realization, it was on the level of sensations. It was that, I don't know, it was like a branch on a tree. Someone just came and cut it off. That's it, there's simply nothing left to discuss. So if there was some topic of conversation, some kind of movement, like you woke up but you're still moving somewhere, dissolving something, then at some point that stops and you realize that, well, maybe that's the final step when you let go completely. The one who still thinks they're not fully awakened or that something is missing, you leave that behind. Or rather, life arranges it so that it disappears, and in a way there's simply nowhere left to return to. There's no state you could return to. You can't compare yourself to anything anymore. And really, from that point on, it's probably not you making the decisions about what to do, it's life itself. In other words, you do what you are meant to do. I probably can't really explain in words how this happens. It just happens, that's all. You probably become this movie to an even greater extent. I wouldn't say 100%, but you make the film, you do what you do, this vitality shows itself, but you aren't really doing anything. You could say that there are circumstances and they do everything. You just adapt, relax and act. But there is no doer in this. And there is no action in this. And there is no you in this. I guess that's all. Bye.